today's video is a follow-up from the recent video we did where we sort of mentioned we were going to talk a bit more about just some more factors to think about with getting animals butchered, butchering animals.
Butchering economics.
Economics of it.
It all kind of ties in with
for the purpose of meat.
Yeah.
Kind of a bit of a broad topic, but we wanted to put this out there to sort of show some of our considerations and where things have maybe changed or where we've had to change priorities or how we plan to do things. But it's also a few things that we think are worth sharing with others who might be thinking of basically raising any animal with the purpose of turning it into a meat product.
Yeah. I mean, when we originally started the homestead, it was as much as we could doing things that we could butcher ourselves. We got into some of the larger animals, and the kind of thought was, sending those off to be butchered was a great way to kind of maybe make a little bit of extra to help bring down some of our costs and expenses on the farm. Maybe selling meat was something we have discussed and talked about. And I think we're just going to kind of go over sort of how we ended up from point A to point B in our thoughts, I think, really is kind of the intent of this video.
Before we even get into this, the one huge take-home message is things change. What was working 5 years ago doesn't necessarily work now and won't necessarily work in the next 5 years. So you have to be able to run with those, and the bigger the animal, the harder that can be.
Yeah, the harder it is to be flexible.
And the more trouble you can get into.
And the one thing I'm going to say is I apologize for the bubbling food in the background. We're in the process of making some homemade pasta sauce for dinner, and I can hear it bubbling away, which I'm sure you can hear too. So,
kind of where we started was small things. And I guess we've always had the mindset, even at the very beginning, of raising some animals for the purpose of meat. Without going down that rabbit hole of why, that's always been a goal. So things like chickens, when we used to have the ducks,
the
rabbits are a big one. The geese, we used to raise I used to raise turkeys. There were all things that sort of fit into that manageable on a small scale.
You can do it yourself.
Can do it yourself with a few skills. Yeah, and that worked pretty well. Now, with one of those examples, turkeys, we don't raise anymore for a few reasons, but one of them was it was hard from the butcher side of it, and the same with the chickens that we raised, etc., to bring that little bit extra back in, because obviously turkeys do eat a lot, and if we raised heritage turkeys, they produce their own offspring, etc. They were really good at it, but then you had a lot more turkeys than you needed yourself, and you always had the live sale, but when we started actually looking into getting the process between at that time, which was like, 7 years ago, I think? Maybe a little off on the timing there. Maybe 8 years ago. But at that time, it was even the cost-benefit ratio of what you needed to feed them versus what it cost to get them butchered didn't really make a lot of sense to keep going with it.
And we have the dilemma, and this is something that when you go into keeping livestock that you're going to get butchered, finding a abattoir near you that did the small stuff was another
very
challenge.
Difficult, because even at that time there was a lot fewer of them.
Well, now we've got the dilemma where an hour and a half drive to an abattoir that will butcher small stuff. That's something definitely to consider, and that's something we've considered, and that's why we really don't do any of the small meat
in that way.
Yeah.
And as we kind of alluded to, things have also changed a little bit on the larger animals. There used to be a lot more processors. So the take-home message for anybody, if you are thinking of doing the sale of the meat, or the other part too, is if you're not comfortable with doing the processing yourself, and that's kind of all parts of the processing, that could be very prohibitive for you to be able to actually... Yeah.
Well, and I mean, a big example, and we kind of hit on this a little bit in our butchering thing. I think we just rambled on, or maybe it was our large livestock one. But it's like people growing out feeder pigs right now. I called the butcher on earlier this week.
You called in for lambs that would have been.
We haven't even had them born yet.
Yeah, the lambs.
But we called.
And their first date they could get into was February 2022.
Yes, so that's a full year out to get lambs butchered. And when longer for larger.
And with the sheep, I will say it this way, but you can float young ewes, for example, a little longer.
But it's hard to float those rams.
And it's hard to float a feeder pig. You get that excellent, massive growth up to, what is it? It's usually
6 months. Usually you want to even butcher before then.
Yeah, because usually you would pick them up at 8 weeks when they're weaned and have them for, 2 to 3 more months.
And we're not saying that this is
across the board.
This is our personal area. We're in Eastern Ontario, and butchers in all around us are in the same situation. Mm-hmm. You're booking a year out. You're booking in animals you don't even know if you have them yet, which is a big thing when it comes to selling meat and needing to use that abattoir.
And it exasperates the problem too when everybody's booking in for things that they may not even actually.
Yeah, everybody's guessing. Someone's booking in 10 pigs because they don't know how many piglets their litter's going to be, and so you've got this knock-on effect at your butcher that is really escalating things to be.
Magnifies it all, big time.
Yeah,
and this discussion on the abattoirs is not a knock on the abattoirs. It's just the reality of it.
It's just there aren't enough of them processing enough animals, and as more and more people get into homesteading and growing their own food, it's having an effect, and that's something that we didn't plan for in the big picture of how we were setting up our farm and what we were doing.
It's crept up faster than you would have thought.
Yeah.
But all it takes is one abattoir to go out of business or what have you, and they're not something that pops up readily overnight. So the other side to this is as the abattoirs are getting fewer and farther between, the cost to process things is also going up. And you did a really good breakdown, so we're not going to mention the abattoir, but this is just prices that anybody can see.
The prices are online. If you Google through some abattoirs in your area, you'll find pricing online. Basically, we worked out our sheep because that was a big one for us. We had sheep that needed to be butchered. We have sheep that are going to be butchered in April because we do want some meat, processed through the butcher. And right now, all fees, the slaughter, the cutting up, and this is just straight paper wrapping, nothing fancy, no labels, no nothing, just the slaughter, wrapping, and environmental fee for...
Which has to do with the other parts.
For one of our lambs is working out to cost us about $5.10 a pound hanging weight. Let's say our lambs are 30 to 35 pounds hanging weight. You're talking $5.10 a pound on that without even factoring in what it cost us to raise that animal. So from a perspective of selling meat, which is something that we had anticipated doing, we're now almost scaling back, not big time because we're happy with what we have in our flock.
We've found other solutions, and the solution is really if you're to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And you just
you're
consuming everything yourself.
And we're going to kind of bank on some live sales and things like that. But I'm just going to put it into perspective. For us, we'd worked out, if you watched our larger livestock economics, which we'll link above, whichever corner it comes in, it worked out, and this is very rough because we didn't calculate exact per animal, but we had these sheep longer than we should have because we couldn't get them into the butcher early enough. So we did. They were approaching a year old, almost a year old. So I broke it down, basing it on a year of cost per sheep, which ended up costing $4.60 a pound to raise that animal. So when we butchered our sheep ourselves, we had a 32 pound a sheep that going to the butcher would still cost $9.70 a pound just to us. And the going rate to sell lamb is $10 a pound. You're making 30 cents, and that's not even factoring in the driving to the butcher. If you had to have the vet out, or you had to buy wormer, or you had to, that stuff's not even factored in there. So it just was a real eye opener when and these were prices that had changed January 1st. So I will say they did do a little bit of a jump, but it wasn't astronomical, but it was a bit of a jump from what the old prices were. It's been a kind of a creep. But I mean, that's just touching on the sheep. Cows and the pigs were not as bad. I mean, we did find that the cows, because it's spread over a larger animal and because of the time frame, you don't butcher that cow to a year and a half. It's not that big of a deal that you're a year out for the butcher, but the big one that we stress again is the pigs.
Because you're a lot quicker.
If you're trying to butcher a pig at 6 months, that you've got to have booked it in before the sow was even bred, which is crazy.
If we're coming up on the time to get those wiener pigs here really soon, if you don't have your spots booked in, you might not be getting one, which means you could have a several 100-pound pig to deal with if you're not willing to do it yourself.
And you know, we don't have the setup to butcher a cow or a big animal. I mean, we don't have somewhere to hang that. We don't have a tractor to winch it up. So that's something we're definitely considering and looking into as we move forward. As you know, we've just kind of gotten into the cow thing, and it has us a little bit, you know, worried about that, but not too. Like I said, the cows is you've got a little bit of leeway there because of the time frame, but it is something that we very much caution people to think about, as so many people are growing their homesteads right now and trying to choose animals and looking at what they're going to do. It is a case of
to think about.
Talk to your butcher before you buy things so that you know what you're getting into, because unless you're willing to do stuff yourself, and by stuff I mean everything, that whole process, you need to have somewhere to do it, somewhere to keep it, and you need to be willing to finish the job. As we just said with the sheep, we couldn't get it butchered for what you could buy it.
Oh, it's not even cost. It's exactly that. You couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
What needed to be.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes full circle back around to self-sufficiency and whatnot too. And people have all different levels of experience and comfort and what they're hoping to do with their homestead, and areas are different too. You might like, we are very attracted to animals that are, relatively speaking, lower maintenance. Yep. Because that, on a smaller scale, that makes it easier for us. The problem with that is those animals don't translate well usually into, what do you call it, like commercially acceptable? Yeah. So, for example, if we were to take our Icelandic sheep to the stockyard to try to get rid of them, we'd get nothing for them. So if you're going that route, and there's nothing wrong with that either, you know, if that's the model that you want to go with, that you raise out extra animals.
And it works for a lot of people. It does. It works for a lot of people. But in that
case, you have to make sure that you are raising what the stockyard wants, for example.
And one thing that we probably should have looked into maybe before this video, and maybe we should look into it in case anybody does comment on it, but would be the fact of, has this affected stockyard value? Because big butchers have got to be having the same backup problem as well as the little ones. Maybe not quite to that extreme, but
it's different. But but yes, I'm sure there is impacts on some of the big meat processing facilities. Well, there has been, and that factors into it too. But you know, the point of the feedlot is to basically be a containment area to hold the animal until it's ready to. Yeah. So that's a whole different scale of economics than what we're talking about on a small scale. We've been doing this for a while, and we had a system that was working really well for us. We never produced a lot of animals to take to the abattoirs. Like, you know, some years we would have a couple feeder pigs. We usually had between 4 and 8 sheep/goats that we would take, kind of varied on the year, because it varied on what you had produced.
we have taken rabbits to be butchered.
Yeah, we have done that too. We weren't as happy with the end results of that. And we've actually, I had a really bumper year where I had ducks, and I had the abattoir tell me they're like, yeah, we can book you in, but we just may decide not to do it. And it was like an eye-opener of, okay, really, you need to know your area, you need to know what your limitations are, and you need to know your comfort level, because, as we say, the bigger the animal, the more, when I say trouble, that could be economic trouble, that could be physical space and feeding trouble, that could be, well, in the case of a cow, that's a lot
of feed.
It could be a lot of feed pain in your situation. So it's just all stuff. It's all food for thought. this isn't meant to be a deterrent. It's not an exhaustive whatever, and it's not a video rant about bashing anybody or any company or anything like that. They're
all steps that every farm has to go through, and you will continue to need an abattoir. They will continue to exist, and pricing will just adjust in the market. This is just us saying for right at this current situation in time and what things are worth and so on. That's where we've gathered our information to make our decisions.
For most of the livestock that we have, we're still very happy with the choices we've made because it's like even the sheep, they still fit within the realm of something that we can actually do ourselves. The Kuni pigs, that's like one of their biggest selling points. They stay small.
And we got into the Kuni pigs before this really got to be a situation with
we'll see how that goes with them in the bigger context of things. But kind of as we mentioned, we like the breeds that are, for various reasons, easier for us to manage. And that's not necessarily the things that are most readily available or cheapest to buy live. For us, it's not it is a change. It's not a big change. It's just more of we know if we're going to raise Icelandic sheep and we're going to have Icelandic lambs born, we're going to have to process X number to fill our freezers to keep us going ourselves. And in the long run, that actually does save us a lot of
well, and by doing some of it ourselves, that does make it that less is spent at the butcher that you're trying to cover the cost of.
You're not worried so much about timing because you can kind of do it more on your own time or when it needs to be done or before things become a problem. And the other thing that people don't think about with this, when I mention problem, is the animal doesn't necessarily have to be at sort of quote-unquote optimal size. Because as you mentioned with the cows, when you take it to an abattoir to be done or you take it to a stockyard, etc., that being at optimal size is going to have the biggest, so what do you call that? Payback, economic return and incentive, right? Because that's what the market wants, or that's even the abattoirs, right? It's like chickens. They're used to processing broilers, not necessarily heritage birds, depending on the abattoir. So that works for that part of the system, but you then have the flexibility. Let's say you have a lot of little males born that are going to cause a problem later. You don't have to keep them to full size. So that's another thing that gives you yourself some flexibility. That's a summary of our thoughts, and we've had a lot of discussions about this in the last couple weeks to month.
But definitely that's something that things are always ever changing on the homestead.
And that's just one more thing to change and one more thing to think about.
Yep.
Whether you've been doing it for 10 years or whether you're just starting for the first time now.
Yes, so let us know your thoughts. Let us know what sort of situations you've had because, hey, we love to hear what other people are finding in the current times.